Good afternoon and happy Valentine's Day, wherever you might be today. I want to speak today about three different religions: Hinduism, Jainism, and Sikhism. We're going to begin with Hinduism, which is the biggest of the three. This religion, as a religion, never really existed until the 19th century, basically the 1800s. Before that, many people only identified as with communal living, or they found themselves as a part of a caste system. They were not necessarily a part of a religion. Many Hindus before that time used the authority of the sacred texts called the Vedas, Vedas, or in many ways they rely on the Brahmin, Brahmin priests to officiate at many of their rituals. There are actually some Hindus who reject the Vedas, they reject the priests, and they basically become a part of an organization built around a saint, or that might be built around a sage. Others, on the other hand, choose not to become a part of any of this, but choose to go into solitude, and they practice contemplation and meditation. And in many ways, they also practice yoga. Some say there is the divine and there is the identifiable divine, while other Hindus believe that God is too expansive, God is too much beyond description, God is far too beyond our own minds. So you see, there's a great amount of diversity in Hinduism, but there are some core beliefs in Hinduism that we need to understand and learn about. First is karma, K-A-R-M-A. That is the law that determines the nature of one's incarnation, karma. And then there's samsara, S-A-M-S-R-A, and that is the cycle of death and rebirth, or birth, death, and rebirth. It's the cycle of life. The third is moksha, M-O-K-S-H-A, which is the end of the cycle, when one is finally released from that cycle of trials and tribulations. Some Hindus do believe in a divine reality. These views and these ideas or beliefs are wide in area, if you will. Some believe they're in monism, that is the doctrine of one reality. There's only one. So there are some Hindus who have a dualistic belief. They know there's a divine being. They believe there's a divine being, such as God, but that God can be separate from the rest of reality. The names, let's talk about some names of the divine reality. Brahman, B-R-A-H-M-A-N, in monistic Hinduism, is the ultimate reality. Brahman, for them, is the supreme reality. The dualists use the term God to perhaps name a certain deity, not necessarily Brahman. There are those who believe in divine reality, but many gods. Monistic Hinduism does not say gods or goddesses do not exist. They believe in the Upanishads, which is a collection of early philosophical texts. In these teachings, the sage says there are divine powers. There are divine powers, but they are divided up, or they come into different deities at one time. At one time, Hinduism believed there could be possibly as many as 330 million deities. But the sage, every sage, makes it very clear there is one Brahman, B-R-A-H-M-A-N. He is the supreme reality. When all is stripped away, they say, when all is stripped away, we can see all that we can see and all that we can touch. There is one ultimate reality, and that reality is Brahman. To the Hindus, even the dualists, all gods are just Brahman. Let's talk about God as an image. To understand the reality of the divine, Hindus rely on images. especially for the dualists who use images to depict the different types of gods that they believe in. They're so used to offering these devotional practices to all these different gods. And for them, images can represent God, but at the same time, many believe the image actually contains the divine presence of that God. There's also a sense of divine in nature. They believe that Brahman is everywhere, so it is believed that Brahman is also found in the natural world. What we can see, what we can touch, Brahman is there. Everything is an expression of Brahman. So there is a lot of worship of natural things in Hinduism. Earth, rivers, mountains, the sun, the moon, all these things, all these worship ideas go back to the roots of Hinduism. Many Hindus use rivers for special purposes. If you remember, a lot of people go down to the Ganges River and bathe because they believe that it's a sacred place. And when you go down to the Ganges and bathe, your sins are washed away because it is a sacred river. Some use the mountains as a sacred place, so they remove themselves to the mountains for solitude. Some believe that, most people in Hinduism believe that living things can be sacred. Well known would probably be the cow. Why? Because most early Hindus lived in rural areas. When a child was weaned from mother's milk, what did they do? They took up a cow's milk. Therefore, the cows were considered to be a second mom. And so Hindus worshipped the cow out of respect for the animal. Hindus have not only translated their reverence for the natural into let me say that again. Hindus have not always translated their reverence for the natural into true ecological activism. We think about the Ganges River, it is filthy, dirty. But some Hindus believe that God comes down as avatars. The two most known are Krishna and Rama. They're basically God who came to earth as manifestations. These two manifestations were the manifestations of Vishnu, V-I-S-H-N-U. And they would come to the earth and they would aid the earth whatever they needed. They're in there as the Bhagavad Gita, B-A-H-A-G-A-V-D-G-I-T-A, 2 words. It is the sacred writing. It shows Krishna as a manifestation of the divine. It gives Krishna a divine nature. The individual, every individual in Hinduism is looking for or seeking a quest for liberation. The Atman, A-T-M-A-N, which is the soul, the underlying soul is not limited to the human body. That's interesting. It's not limited to a human body. It is that part that moves from the human body and moves to the human body to another human body, or moves to another form, if you will, through reincarnation. Monistic Hinduism teaches that the Atman, A-T-M-A-N, is truly Brahman. In other words, it is God, or the God form in that Atman, or that part of the human that's not really human but spiritual. Then there's the word karma, K-A-R-M-A, and that simply means action. It closely is related to cause and effect. Bad actions, or good actions rather, bring good effects. Bad actions bring bad effects. For the future to look good, a person's actions must be good, and that leads to dharma. Now, so what's dharma? Dharma is the law, duty, and righteousness. It is living to uphold the cosmic and the social order. Then there is another word we need to understand. It's samsara, S-A-M-S-R-A. That is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So what gives rise to samsara? Humans are drawn into the world in a real sense. We are selfish. Let's face it, people, we are basically born as selfish people. Why would people want to escape samsara? Because beyond all of this, there is an inexpressible end. And that brings us to the next word that deals with samsara, and that is moksha, M-O-K-S-H-A. It is the release from samsara. It's a release comes through good karma. How we do good karma will lead to samsara. It's overcoming the attachments to the world. It's overcoming selfishness, and that will bring release. From monistic Hindus, moksha is when the Atman is united with Brahman. In other words, for the monistic Hindus, moksha, when we finally reach that point of release, that's when the Atman, that part of us that's really Brahman, is now reunited with Brahman. For dualistic Hindus, it's where the Atman exists in the presence of a supreme being, not necessarily what they would consider Brahman. Now, there are three paths to liberation. Karma Marga, K-A-R-M-A, new word, M-A-R-G-A. This is to live right when it comes to relationships. Bhakti, B-H-A-K-T, Marga. This is to be involved in worship in the temple and in the home. Then there's Jnana Marga, which is J-N-A-N-A-M-A-R-G-A, devoting one's time and energy to the purpose of contemplation and spiritual insight. What about the thought of individuals and living in society? Liberation and moksha comes, and it doesn't really depend on a caste. It doesn't depend on a status. It doesn't depend on your gender. There is a caste varna, and there are four. That's basically the social structure in Hinduism. There are four basic classes in the caste system. The Brahmin, B-R-A-H-M-I-N, not A-N, B-R-A-H-M-I-N, they are the priests. There are the K-S-H-A-T-R-I-Y-A. They are the warriors, the fighters. There are the V-A-I-S-H-Y-A. They are the producers. They're the farmers. They're the merchants. That's three. And then finally, there are the Shudra, S-H-U-D-R-A. They are the servants. Now, we have to understand that all these castes are determined at birth. The Shudras are the last of the castes, and they are basically the untouchables. They are the outcasts. They are the subcasts. And below them, there is the subcaste also called the Jati. And for them, you can marry another in the Jati caste, but you cannot marry above and you cannot marry below. But there is nothing below, so they can't marry them. In Hinduism, they believe there are four stages in life. There's the student, there is the householder, there is the forest-dwelling hermit, and there is the renouncer who just renounces everything. In Hinduism, there are four aims of life. There is dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, which is duty. There is kama, K-A-M-A, which is sensual enjoyment. There is artha, A-R-T-H-A, which is material wealth. And again, finally, there is moksha, M-O-K-S-H-A, which is liberation. There are sacred texts in Hinduism. There are the Vedas. Now, they were not supposed to have been created by man. They were heard, if you will, by these older poet sages. And there are four basic Vedas. The Rig Veda, R-I-G-V-E-D-A, two words. It's a collection of hymns. There's the Sama Veda, S-A-M-A-V-E-D-A, two words. It's melodies. There's the Yajur, Y-A-J-U-R Veda, which is ritual formulas. There's the Atharva, Atharva, Veda, which is hymns, spells, and the incantations. Another set of sacred texts are the Upanishads. It's the last of the Vedas. These are texts that give concepts to basic Hinduism. And then finally, there's the Bhagavad Gita. This text is used to bring new meaning. It brings a whole new meaning to moksha. It gives a whole new meaning to the liberation. There are certain sects, S-E-C-T-S, in Hinduism, Vaishnavism, Vaishnavism. These are Hindus who worship the goddess Vishnu. There's Shaivism, Shaivism. They worship Shiva. This is the destroyer at the end of time, but is also the benefactor of the world now. There's Shaktivism, Shaktism. They worship the goddess Shakti. There are also gurus and saints and sages. These are powerful religious authorities who pass on their knowledge and their rank to the next senior disciple. So, for just a second, let's talk about the history of Hinduism. It basically comes from the Indus Valley civilization. They developed near the Indus River. They developed through great trade routes within their country and to other countries. The civilization fell for several reasons. The civilization finally fell, and it did for several reasons. First was climate change, and the agriculture was basically gone. And then there was the migration of the Aryans. So who were the Aryans? These were nomadic and warrior-type people who entered the Indian subcontinent. They were nomadic. These people developed a body of texts called the Vedas. And during the Veda period, sacrifice became the point of worship. Fire became the focal point of service and focal point of worship. Then came the age of the Guptas, or the Gupta Empire. These were leaders who gave lots and lots of thought to arts and sciences and religion and literature. Then became the Bhakti period, B-H-A-K-T-I, a period of time that came to challenge the rise of two other religions, Buddhism and Jainism. Then there was the Tantra period. Another new system was put into place with an emphasis on symbols and rituals and yoga and postures and breathing techniques and mantras. And then there came a time of the Mughal, M-U-G-H-A-L dynasty, when the Hindus came into realization that of the Muslims, raised by Mahmud Ghaznavi from Afghanistan. He raided northern India and he took over, and he brought with him the Muslim faith. And then came a time of colonialism when the British came to India and brought their language as well as their religious faiths. This gave rise to some Hindus who worked diligently to reform the Hindu faith and to revitalize it. One was Gandhi, G-H-A-N-D-H-I. He had struggles against the British for independence. He was a political and a religious and a social reformer. He fought, if you will, for Indian independence. And he developed a political philosophy of nonviolent resistance. He was able to topple the British Empire in India. Let's talk about Hinduism as a way of life. Many people believe that Hinduism is not really, not necessarily a religion, but more of a way of life. And it says they placed a lot of emphasis, if you will, on doing rather than believing. They do have temples, they do have icons. They do have buildings for worship. And in these buildings where they go to worship, there are basically two icons. One is the main icon placed at the center of the temple, and the other is a processional icon. Now, In the temple, there can be at least 16 different offerings made. The eighth offering involves pouring a substance on the icon. Let's talk about forms of worship. Arati, A-R-A-T-I, is an offering of light. Lamps are lit with oil. The lamp is waved in front of a worshipped icon in a clockwise direction. They have mantras, M-A-N-T-R-A-S, which are recitations with ritual formulas. They sometimes have sacrifices, actually usually using fire. They build altars, they light a fire, they make offerings of usually milk, cereal, fruits, flowers. In Hinduism, they do have rites of passage. They have initiation rites, initiation rituals. For boys, it is a ritual that allows them to begin sacrifices. For girls, it comes at the time of menstruation. And marriage usually involves a fire sacrifice of blessing. And then there's death. Death is basically cremation. It is the basic form of burial for Hindus. That is the last sacrifice in Hinduism. Okay, we'll take a break for just a second. I'm not going to turn my thing off because it may not come back on again. And we're going to talk for just a second about Sikhism. Let's talk about the teachings of Sikhism. S-I-K-H-I-S-M. A Sikh, S-I-K-H, means disciples, or means disciple. Sikhs are disciples of the 10 gurus who began with the very most revered Guru Nanak and ending with Guru Gobind Singh. Even though gurus were known in Hinduism, for Sikhism it's different. Each guru in Sikhism is a teacher of God's will. Sikhs believe that God reveals his grace through the gurus. Let's talk about Guru Nanak. He was born in an area that is now, again, modern Pakistan. He came to believe in the oneness of God. He came to believe in the need to get closer to God through meditation and the singing of hymns and the praise to God. And believe it or not, Nanak actually wrote 30 hymns. He proclaimed from that point on, there is neither Hindu and there is not Muslim, there is only one God. He spent the next several decades, if you will, proclaiming and declaring and learning from other religions. He learned from Muslims, he learned from Hindus, he learned from Jainism. He continued to proclaim his belief in monotheism. And he found no distinction between castes. He didn't believe in caste or gender or creed. He also called for good deeds. At the age of 50, he established his first community in Pakistan and erected a very special place of worship. He saw a need to provide food for the for the poor and people that needed it. He actually worked in a community kitchen called a langar, L-A-N-G-A-R. Followers believed the guru was not divine, but the guru was spiritually advanced. His death was on September the 22nd, 1539. Let's talk about Sikhs and their scriptures. The Adi Granth, A-D-I, new word, G-R-A-N-T-H, is the most sacred text. It was compiled by Guru Arjan, A-R-G-A-N, in 1603 to 1604. It contains the works of his four predecessors, along with his own hymns and his own poems. Every copy, and I find this very interesting, every copy is identical in script, and it is identical in its pages. For Sikhs, The Adi Granth is most brilliant when it's set to music. Dasam Granth, D-A-S-A-M Granth, normally attributed to Guru Gobind Singh, it was not officially authorized until 1902. The Rahit, R-A-H-I-T, was a collection of teachings over time, but it was also never came to the same level as the Adi Granth, but it was a collection of teachings. So let's talk about some of the teachings of this religion. One God. They were definitely monotheistic. God is one. God is self-existent. God is eternal. God is creator. One God without form. One God without gender. Sikhs work not to give God any human characteristics. I will say that again. Sikhs do not give God any human characteristics. There is one God, but not only creator, this God is also the preserver, and God is also the destroyer. For Sikhs, they believe that God is distinct from creation, yet dwells with creation. Therefore, it is possible for humans to make contact with God and also to come to know God. For this religion, for the Sikhs, the human condition, the worst possible human condition is self-centeredness. We are all self-centered. They advocate kindness to the living things, and they believe that their creatures are here to provide for us. They are not opposed to eating meat, although many are vegetarians. And they also believe that God dwells in human beings. God dwells in all human beings and is actively concerned with our spiritual welfare, but human beings neglect that in search of our own self-centeredness. The Sikh word for self-centeredness is havmi, H-A-V-M-A-I, and it's dominated by about 5 vices. Number 1, lust. Number 2, anger. Number 3, greed. Number 4, attachment. Number 5, pride. As long as havmai and the 5 vices persist, humans are always going to be a part of samsara, life, death, relife, or rebirth. Always that circle of life, if you will. Akal Burkha, God, is in people showing them the potential for truth and therefore perceiving God. Through humbling oneself, if we humble ourselves and we truly deny these things in our lives that I just spoke about, the 5 vices, then we can be open to grace. Once we receive that grace, the person then should respond in loving devotion and meditation. Mukti, M-U-K-T-I, is liberation. That's the point at which a person reaches eternal bliss in the presence of God. And that's not, I'm going to say this, that is not dependent on caste, that is not dependent on gender. There are 4 cardinal prohibitions, things you cannot do in Sikhism. Cutting one's hair, eating meat that is not properly slaughtered, engaging in extramarital sex, using tobacco. Let me say those again. Cutting one's hair, eating meat not properly slaughtered, engaging in extramarital sex, and using tobacco. Then they have the 5 Ks. Kes, K-E-S, stands for uncut hair. The Kanga, K-A-N-G-H-A, is a small comb worn in the hair, and that is a sign of cleanliness. The Kara, steel wristlet, is on the arm, and is your connection with God. The kirpan, Kirpan, is a sword worn as a sign of devotion. And the Kachh is a pair of shorts that are with a drawstring, which shows a symbol of chastity. If you want to talk about the history of Sikhism, Guru Nanak and his 9 successors were revealers of the truth. And they shared a divine essence according to the Sikhs. Arjan, the 5th guru, compiled the scripture that later would become the Adi Granth, which is the most important sacred scripture. He also built what is called a golden temple and became a geographical center for Sikhs. Guru Gobind Singh was portrayed as contemplative, as well as the fact that he was always ready for battle. He grew Sikh militarism and he engaged in several conflicts. He also founded the Khasla, Khalsa, which is a community of pure ones. Truth is, Sikhism is in search of a nationhood. They don't really want to establish their own national identity by causing conflict. In truth, they're scattered throughout the world. There are about 2 million Sikhs who actually live outside of Punjab in India. They live in different cultures. They often causes conflicts with the 5Ks. The Sikhs, as a way of life, they have daily devotions and they have daily practices. Important is the Nam Simran, Namsimaran, which is the remembrance of the name of God. During this worship, they sing hymns and they have contemplative meditations on God. They have daily prayers in the form of devotions. A Sikh worships in the Gurdwara, Gurdwara. A Gurdwara is the doorway of the Guru. Any building, let me say this again, any building that contains a copy of the Adi Granth is technically a Gurdwara, or a house of worship for the Sikhs people. Other than the presence of the Adi Granth, and I think this is so cool, the Adi Granth actually sits on a pillow underneath a canopy. And if that's all there is, then that's the only requirement to be a place of worship. Worship for the Sikhs is not necessarily any particular time of day. It could be in the morning, it could be in the afternoon, but the evening is preferred because many of the people actually have gone out to battle and they're coming home to worship. Worship for them consists of singing, reading the Adi Granth, and maybe storytelling by one of the gurus. Finally, there's the sharing of the Kara Prasad, Karahprasad, which is 2 words, which is a special pudding. They just pass it around and everybody gets a bite of it. More like maybe communion for Christians. There's a special time of birthing and naming. Baby's name is given by going to the house of worship. Okay? They go to the Adi Granth. And the Adi Granth is randomly opened. They go to the canopy, and then their Bible, the Adi Granth, is randomly opened. The child's name is based on the first letter that appears on the left-hand page of the scripture when they open it. The girls, they are also given the name Kaur, Kaur, but then this, again, that drawing from the Adi Granth. The boy's name is given Singh, Singh, always. And then that word from the Adi Granth. There's a special time of tying the turban. At a certain age, boys learn how to tie a turban, which is basically a rite of passage. And then girls do not traditionally wear turbans, but they wear a scarf or they wear a veil that covers their head. Marriage is always arranged by parents. Women can only marry Sikhs, but it does not have to be someone from their own caste system. What happens after death? Cremation. This is really cool. The body is washed. The body is dressed and adorned with the 5 Ks. Women cannot enter the burial grounds or the funeral grounds. The body is placed on a funeral pyre, and the oldest son or another friend or a relative lights the pyre and burns the pyre and the body. And the ashes are collected and buried, or they might even be immersed in running water. Women in Sikhism. Sikhs have always maintained a gender equality when it comes to spiritual liberation. Women are to participate fully in religious life, but for the most part, in this religion, it is being seen more and more as patriarchal, or basically turned toward men. Another break for a second, okay? And let's go back and talk about the other religion for the day or for the night, whichever time you might be watching this particular video. And it's called Jainism. 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 We're going to focus on the orthodox form of Jainism. They believe in nonviolence. Again, they believe in nonviolence. They live a very ascetic life. They don't have a lot of things. They also believe in the need for perfect knowledge. Most of them can be found in India today. Jainism does not look to one founding father. They don't believe there was one person that actually started the religion. But there are the Tirthankras, Tirthankars. They are the ford makers, what I consider the ford makers, the river crossers, the one who took you across where you needed to go. They were and are the Jains, Jains, who made the way possible. There's Vardhmana was the last of the Jains. He was an ascetic wanderer who in his 13 years of wandering achieved Kevala, Kevala, which they would consider complete or perfect knowledge that leads to liberation, a liberation from samsara. They again believe in that ideal of birth, life, death, rebirth. Okay? Let's talk about the teachings of Jainism. First is ahimsa and asceticism. Ahimsa is pure and unchangeable eternal law. Ahimsa basically means bring no harm, bring no injury to any human, bring no harm, bring no injury to any animal. Some believers, strict believers, go as far as saying you don't bring any kind of hurt or injury to atomic particles. I don't know how they're going to figure that one out. Some of their 3 core practices: nonviolence. They're nonviolent people. They believe in compassion and forgiveness. Jains are also vegetarians. They're non-absolutism. They encourage dialogue with other faiths. They don't just think they're the only ones that are right and everybody else is wrong. They encourage dialogue. They believe in non-possessiveness. They believe in balance between need and desires. They also believe in the cosmic cycle of generations. It's like a wheel with spokes. And the upper spokes of the wheel represent the golden age and an age of prosperity. And then when the wheel moves on, you get down to the other spoke, everything begins to go into a gradual decline until the universe reaches total moral depravity and begins to move on the upward swing again. And they also believe, which I think is very interesting, that these stages last around 21,000 years. The Loka, which is the universe, they believe has no beginning. It also has no end. There is no creator. Everything has always existed, and it always will. There are certain categories of existence, though. The Jiva are the living things. That's us and the animals, plants. There's the Ajiva, A-J-I-V-A, which is the non-living. Jiva are souls that have no forms. This is very interesting, but interact with the atoms of the body. Figure that one out. All jivas are equal, no matter the size of the body it inhabits. Truthfully, Jainism has a good grasp on general biology. Liberation and salvation does not depend on any deity. That needs to be said. It does not depend on any deity. Some would label it an atheistic religion, but Jains do believe that deities do inhabit the heavens. What someone said is that Jainism may be more transtheistic. They do believe in karma and human condition. Two major categories. Jiva, I might have said this before, Jiva, which has a soul, and Ajiva, which is simply matter. The Jiva is pure and formless, but it becomes intertwined with impure matter. Humans are born that way. For Jains, karma is the process where matter dirties the soul. And moral actions dirty the soul even more, where virtuous actions bring only light quantities to the matter. Kavala, K-E-V-A-L-A, is the quest for heavenly rebirth. Rebirth happens immediately after death, good and bad. Now, let's talk about the history of Jainism. It's mostly practiced in India today. There are basically only 5.6 Jainists living today. Jainism is a way of life. They believe in Digambara, D-I-G-A-M-B-A-R-A, which means sky-clad. What that breaks down to say is the monks who believe in this religion, they walk around naked. The nuns, on the other hand, they have to wear simple white garments. No equality in that, right? They have 5 great vows. Avoid inflicting violence on life forms. That is ahimsa. Avoid inflicting violence on other forms of life. Abstain from lying. Do not take what has not been given to you. Do not rob or anything like that. Renounce sexual activity, which makes me begin to wonder how they procreate. Renounce possessions. Women in Jainism are afforded positions, and it is the laity who really support the monks and the nuns. Jainists always make one pilgrimage a year to a sacred shrine, just like the people of Islam are supposed to make a pilgrimage to a sacred shrine. Only this time it's once a year. Now, you will be receiving in a little while the tests on Christianity and Islam, but this is basically the 3 religions we were going to talk about tonight in class. I hope you receive them. I hope you understand them. If you don't receive them, you can get back with me via my email and let me know that you didn't get it for whatever reason whatsoever, and we will try to make sure that we get it back to you. But I hope you enjoy your Valentine's Day. I hope you have a good time, and just go out there and just be yourself. Okay? See you next week, hopefully in class.